All right. Hello, everyone. My name is Cassandra Trimnell. I am Executive Director at Sickle Cell 101 and fellow Sickle Cell Warrior. I'm so happy to host this panel today. The theme of this panel is answering the tough questions related to sickle cell disease. These are topics that don't really get discussed and could even be controversial. I don't know. I guess we'll have to ask the panelists what they think. So I'm looking forward to today's discussion. So I have here with me Tahira Austin, Terry Jackson, Philip Okwell, and Ray Blaylark. So welcome. I guess let's start off with having each of you introduce yourselves. And Tahira, if you don't mind going first, and then if you could tell us who you are, what you do, anything interesting about yourself. And if you don't mind disclosing your genotype, I know a lot of people are really interested in that information, me too included. If not, it's fine. Only if you mind sharing.
Yes, thank you. Thank you for having me, Cass. So again, my name is Tahira Austin Muhammad. I am the Chief Operations Officer at Crescent Foundation. We're here in Philadelphia. We serve adults living with sickle cell disease in Philadelphia and the Delaware Valley. We have partnerships with our local adult hospitals and support from our local pediatric hospitals. I'm also an adult living with sickle cell disease. I live with genotype SS, and I'm a wife. I'm a mother. My daughter has trait. I knew my husband did not have. He wasn't a carrier of sickle cell disease during my courtship, and that's another discussion. But I had a Islamic courtship before I was absolutely married, and that's a part of the courtship process of just finding out everything that each one of us carry genetically in terms of family planning. And what else? Something interesting about myself. I just realized that I um I do I'm addicted to sugar.
Y'all are.
And it's really surprising because I'm such a healthy eater, and I never realized just how much juice I drink in a day, even if it's 100% juice. I drink a lot of juice. So right now I am on a no sugar diet, and it's not really for like weight loss. It's just really just to test my discipline into laying off so much sugar. So that is something interesting about me that I just learned about myself within this pandemic, like just walking back and forth to the refrigerator.
It is the juice that'll get you. I'm addicted to juice too, so I think that's something we all have to work on. All right, Philip, do you want to go ahead and go next?
Sure. Hello, everyone. My name is Philip Okwell. I am a sickle cell warrior, S-beta-0 thalassemia. I am, again, LA raised, but now reside in Atlanta by way of Houston, Texas. So hopscotching across the country. I am a father of two. A 5-year-old son and a 2-year-old daughter who both have the trait, and similarly had that whole genotype discussion, with their mom. And I'm a board member of Sickle Cell Association of Houston, and I guess co-collaborator of the Blood Brothers podcast. I don't know if I mentioned that one before. And looking forward to the discussion. Oh, and a philosophy major, if that matters for this discussion. I was a philosophy major in undergrad, so
fancy.
we'll see. Yeah.
Wonderful. All right, Terry, I'll go to you.
Okay, hello, my name is Terry Jackson. I have SS is my genotype. I was the first poster child for the state of Virginia for sickle cell disease, and that really influenced my life heavily. And so I went to school, and now I have a PhD in genetics and genomics from Duke University. And as I said, that was what got me so interested in science, was actually having this illness. Something interesting about me, well, I was actually working at Stanford in California. This is where I met Cassandra, and I dropped everything and came home to help take care of my stepfather who has Parkinson's disease, and my mother, to help her take care of him, because I was aware of how difficult it is being a caregiver, and I didn't want caregiver burnout to happen. Even if you love somebody a trillion, it can still happen. And I didn't believe that he deserved that. So I dropped everything and came home. And so right now, I just work at a garden center, and I love it. I actually love it. So part time, it's fun.
It really suits you.
Beautiful.
It really does.
You know, I'm trying to learn the gardens. I might have to connect with you on that offline. So
Great. I'd love to teach you.
I started one this summer.
I
Did
did
you?
as well. Yeah.
Nice.
Hey, I need to get
Yes,
on the
Look, all of
bandwagon
you.
then here.
That's a side panel. That's
Yeah, yeah. We can talk about gardening.
you're right.
And last but not least, Ray Blaylark, would you please introduce yourself?
I sure will. I am Ray Blaylark. I am the mother of a 24-year-old male warrior with SS. I carry the trait. I am also the founder and executive director at Sickle Cell Foundation of Minnesota. And the third side of my hat is I am the Sickle Cell Patient Family Care Coordinator and patient advocate at our local children's hospital here in Minneapolis.
She does it all.
Oh, something fun about me. My husband is a motorcycle lover, so he likes to get me on the back of that and traipse across the cities and across borders, and I refuse to buy one of my own, and he's trying to make me.
It's a nice way to cuddle, right?
So tight.
That's how
So
I
tight.
imagine. For sure. Thank you so very much. All right. So we'll just go ahead and get into the first question I have for you all. So this question may sound obvious or may seem obvious, but, you know, I guess at this point of your life, you know, just taking all factors and everything that we have today into account, what's more appealing to you? And would this be a cure, I guess, and this would be by way of bone marrow transplant or gene therapy, or would this be treatments to help manage sickle cell disease? So what, I guess, is more appealing to you?
Can I go first?
Yeah, absolutely.
I would say on a personal level, as an individual, I would think treatments. And I say that because there's so many of us as adults who have been through the wire with sickle cell disease, even with just organ damage. And right now, you know, we may be thriving, but the damage that has been done is irreversible. And so I think going into these curative therapies, it's a huge, heavy risk, you know, that it may do more damage because of so much that we've endured over the years. I think curative therapy, when I look at it, is for, you know, those who can withstand it health-wise, but also those children who they get a chance now to not endure all of the years of pain and sickness and organ damage that we've gone through as adults. You know, so you kind of get to stop it or get ahead of it before they get older. That's how I think of curative therapy. If not for me, then, you know, for the future. But as far as treatments, I would love for us to have treatments that are universal and that everyone is able to access, and when it's not according to the type of insurance that they have, where they're located, you know, whether they're in the city or in a rural area, and a treatment that it doesn't matter what genotype you have, because you're under the umbrella of sickle cell disease, this treatment will work for you. You know, this treatment will give you a better quality of life. And that's what when it comes to adults with sickle cell disease, what I like to, you know, advocate for is a better quality of life that they're having now, because then that way you have something to live for or look towards as someone who wants to be independent or live an independent lifestyle. And so definitely better treatments, It's not that I'm opposed to curative therapy, but I'm for a better quality of life with a universal treatment than a cure.
Well signed. To expound a little bit on that, I think Tahira used a perfect word, which is
I don't know what's
a
going
perfect
on.
word, which is she used the word curative, which I just learned recently as a distinction between a cure, as in I'm guessing a universal cure, versus something that can help but is not necessarily guaranteed. And I don't my overall philosophical view on sickle cell in general is and the challenges we face in healthcare system here in the United States is a matter of treating our chronic illness proactively versus reactively. And I think the healthcare system is unfortunately primarily reactive. And so if I could add a third option to this choice, I think in addition to a cure versus a treatment, is I would love to see a much more seamless or cohesive recommendations on how we can better manage our sickle cell proactively, as in nutrition, yoga, whatever those things may be, to minimize the severity of it. And I think unfortunately those options in the traditional healthcare system that we encounter aren't they aren't very well developed. They don't seem as robust as maybe they could be, in my view. So cure, treatment, and or proactively, naturopathically preventing sickle cell, to me, might be an even better option. And I can go into why a little bit more further in the conversation.
All right. May I now? May I speak?
Yes.
Were you finished? I'm sorry.
I was. Thank you.
Okay. Fantastic. I believe that for myself personally, that I just would like to have a treatment where, I'm just fine. I don't have to deal with these crises anymore. I've lived a long, life. I'm middle-aged, and I know that these procedures for cures are like they said, they're a bit risky, and your body needs to be a little bit more plastic to bounce back once you've had these types of these surgeries.
Mm-hmm.
Someone has also asked me before, and I had to think about this really hard. Did I not want to have an actual cure because sickle cell is part of my identity? And so, the honest answer was partially yes. It is part of my identity. If I didn't have sickle cell, who am I? It's kind of that type of a situation. But I think that's more 30%, and it's more 70% that, I just feel like I'm at a point where, although I have daily pain, I don't have as many hospitalizations as I used to have. And even so, I don't have as much organ damage as I think I actually should. I've had some terrible, terrible crises, multiple, but my organs have actually are in actually pretty good shape. So that's also part of the reason why I'm feeling like, okay, I think that I can have sickle cell and live to old age, is how I feel. So that's my answer right there.
So I'll give a little bit of a different perspective as a caregiver. I think that from a caregiver perspective, and I've kind of surveyed so many individuals and caregivers to see what they think as well. Because as a parent who watches your child in agony, who watches your child suffer, a parent is a fixer, and the inability to fix it, the inability to take it away, it makes you yearn. Not them, put it on me, right? And so that the heart for a cure is kind of where I live. But I also think, and thank you, Phil, for saying it, that some of those are tricky words, right? When we talk about curative options, cures, because we don't talk a lot about the fact that you still have trait. You can still pass the trait along. So how much of a cure is that if it is still in the genetic line? And so now when I've asked my son, and we have many discussions about this, and he's had opportunities to potentially dig a little bit deeper, and he reflects much of what you all have said. In some ways, it's all he knows. He is more comfortable with what he doesn't know, even in his discomfort, and what he does know, even in his discomfort, than he is in what he doesn't know and may not know about what's ahead in exploring or participating in those other curative therapies. And so, you know, learning to honor and respect that as because he is an autonomous being, even though he's my child and I might try to make him, he just is not going to. But I also understand both sides of it from a caregiver perspective versus a warrior perspective.
May I say one more thing, and I think it fits into this actual question, and that is, you know, as you were referring to the curative versus the cure, and I mean, I guess also I am a stickler about that, because many of these therapies, they don't actually cure, they don't change the mutation. Okay, all they do is they give you some more fetal hemoglobin production or something like that. They don't actually change that actual mutation. And so when I heard, you know, there are these cures, I'm like, oh, really? Oh, wow. And then I went and looked it up, and it's like, I was like, they don't even fix, it's not fixing the mutation? Like, well, you know, okay, talk to me when they do that. Once the mutation is actually fixed, let's talk. And, you know, then there's also a big difference between, and so therefore you can get cured, have this cure, but you're still passing on the sickle cell gene down the line, which
I have a
think is
question,
bad thing.
Terry.
But
Can you answer it? So with gene therapy, when they actually can cut out, because I think one of them, they can cut out the vector, right? Or they use a vector,
Editing.
right? They do gene editing with that one, and they're cutting it out. Well, they're using one of them. They use a vector to come in, which is the HIV vector, to come in and basically like eat it. Then the other one is they're actually cutting it. That one still doesn't. You're still passing on the trait,
yeah,
although.
I mean, it's also you have to understand: is this affecting you in your bone marrow?
Yeah.
Is it the bone marrow, or is it in your gonads? Right?
Mm-hmm.
Because your bone marrow has nothing to do with your sex cells that you're passing on. So they have to actually correct it in the actual gonads.
Wow, I didn't even realize that part.
And I
Yeah,
think that's the,
Go
sorry,
ahead.
I didn't mean to step on you, but I think that's an important question, right? Because
Yeah.
as Terry alluded to earlier, kind of risk reward, particularly for those of us who are older and have kids, right? That we,
Yeah.
you know, it's like, you know, I'll be 40 next year, and so the question of something whereas I could go through this treatment and, you know, it might cause me to be unable to have children going forward. And even then, there's still no guarantee that that it is a cure, and that it will do what I needed to do, or even if it does succeed, that I will recover because of, you know, because I'm not as plastic as I might have been 20 years ago, right? And so that risk reward is something where, for me, at my stage, in my chapter with my sickle cell journey, I'm going to lean more towards the treatment, and hopefully a treatment, something that I can do to prevent myself having that organ damage that Tahira mentioned, or to prevent myself from having the severity or requiring the hospitalizations to begin with. And another, a second reason for me that this is big is because I didn't do an interesting thing about me. earlier. So here's one that and it factors into all of my advocacy and discussions on the subject, is that I'm, lucky to be dealing with sickle cell here in the U.S., but I'm British by birth, I'm Nigerian by blood, and I'm American by naturalization. And so I have many cousins and loved ones who are in Nigeria, and I'm often thinking about them in terms of what are some of these options, and in a way that I don't know if this is a survivor's guilt thing, but I do feel a certain kind of way about having treatment options available to me that aren't available to them. And as much as, particularly being from West Africa, I understand the impetus to want to leapfrog, right? The idea that, all right, well, we didn't have extensive landline infrastructure in West Africa, but we're all on cell phones, and many people have 2, sometimes 3 cell phones in Nigeria. But the idea that sickle cell, having been around and known about for going on 120 years now, has really had no real treatment options, primarily hydroxyurea for much of the last 20 years. And then, we're starting to see a lot of stuff in the pipeline, which is great, but sickle cell is too complex a condition. And yes, it is a single mutation, but the manifestations, I mean, I know of twins with sickle cell who their sickle cell does not manifest the same. And so we need to really do a lot to lay the groundwork, I think, in terms of treatment options before we look to leapfrog directly into a cure. Now, that's not to say that if, for example, your son, Ray, if he's young and plastic enough and maybe doesn't, the risk reward comes out different for him, that he shouldn't pursue some of those curative options. But I think we definitely want to emphasize as many treatment options as we can, not just for, because you don't want it to be a first world situation, right? Where those of us with sickle cell in the first world will benefit, and then the rest of the world just, whenever they get whenever that becomes an option for them, who knows how long that.
I mean, it's in Ghana, they're just now getting hydroxyurea access.
Exactly.
Right. And I know that because I lived there and I got sick there. And I was like, wait, I got to pay for my medicine inpatient. Right. This is how the system works here. It was mind blowing. So to know that when I come back to the States, the care that I complain about the most, right? When I'm my ED experiences, my inpatient experiences here in the US is top notch in comparison to even in the Caribbean, where my family is from. I've been sick in Trinidad. I've been sick in Barbados. And it is mind blowing that my family members are living over there like that, right? And when they get sick, this is what they experience.
Yeah, and I think the cure versus therapy option is, as you said, it's first about making it universally available and accessible. Just because it's available doesn't mean it's accessible.
Exactly.
But then it also depends. There are so many different phenotypes, and people have had so many different levels of experiences and levels of quality care at various times in their life, or lack thereof. That's really going to drive them in one direction over the other many times. And so being able to offer our community more than just, one therapy and more than just one curative option. We need a whole slew, a whole menu of options to choose from, so that we can actually choose and make an informed decision about what is best for us in our situation and the journey that we've had with sickle cell individually.
Phil mentioned something that often comes up in Crescent about integrative health, so having yoga or access to yoga, having access to acupuncture, and all of these other things that are preventative options, right? Or preventative treatments to not only just help you cope, but help you just have a better quality of life when it comes to experiencing and living with chronic pain. And what I've noticed is within the hospital systems, they don't want that they don't want to take that on.
They'll do it in pediatrics, but not adults. They'll sing its praises.
They will build
in pediatrics
entire integrative health centers in pediatrics. I literally participated in a yoga and acupuncture study in pediatrics, and then it just does not cross over. No. You're talking about in Philadelphia, where CHOP and PEN or HUP are directly across the street from each other. Like,
Mhm.
and all of the pediatric doctors at CHOP are assistant professors at University of Penn. So it's crazy how it just does not translate
Right.
at all, right? And so but I totally agree. And if I feel like for us in Philadelphia, for integrative health, that is something that it seems like Crescent is going to have to take up the helm to have our adults with sickle cell disease be able to access those things.
And not just access them, but I'm looking forward to our community duplicating those things, right? To a great extent, we are depending on a system to create the things that we need, when to go the extra mile to create those things for ourselves, so that we have centers of care that are about integrative medicine, that are non-traditional approaches, that is for us, by us.
Right, you be teaching.
Absolutely.
So Ray,
And
can I?
go ahead.
Oh, go ahead, Philip.
No, we'll circle back. Go ahead. Let's move the
Oh,
conversation.
I just wanted to ask a follow-up question, because I noticed when we do ask that question within the community, curative versus treatment, I find a lot of people living with sickle cell disease saying treatment, and a lot of caregivers saying the opposite, cure. And I just don't know if that's something you can speak to a little bit more. I feel like my mom would say the same thing. You better go try and get the cure.
My dad too.
I believe all of our parents would say that.
Right.
For the same reason that Ray spoke about.
Exactly. It really is about removing the suffering. And so, I would arguably say, if that were delivered in a treatment, and we didn't have some of the traumatic experiences as a parent of watching our children suffer, these are looking to us, screaming our names. I'm going to go out on a limb. I'm going to say, when the George Floyd murder happened right here in our city, it was a block and a half from where I grew up. And so it hit me different, right? And at that point, when he cried for his mama, I broke, and it took me weeks to put myself back together, because it triggered something that I didn't even know was in me, in all the times that my son cried for mama, when he was in the hospital, when he was in pain, when they couldn't find a vein and they were sticking him for the 4th or 5th time at 2, 3, 4, 5 years old. Those are traumas that live on us as parents and caregivers. And so when you're watching someone else, someone you love, that could be your spouse, that could be, when you're watching someone and you are the person who they see as their protector, in a sense, and you can't protect, you want that cure, and I'll walk you there. So let's go.
That's powerful.
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah.
I think also, so here's an example kind of outside of the sickle cell space, just to give you context, right? And so I've worn glasses almost my whole life, right? Since I was 8 years old. And my joke is that I was reading straight out the womb, and that's why I needed glasses by age 8. It may have been some sickle cell related stuff, who knows? But when I, got married and was getting ready to have kids, I had gone to get this LASIK inquiry many times, right? And to see what was, is it worth it? Initially, it was too expensive. But after getting married, the price had come down quite a bit. It had been a few years, but they did an interesting thing where they sold my wife by showing her what my uncorrected vision looked like. They put the lenses so that she could see, and she just was like, no way, you're not going to be driving our kids with that kind of vision. Even though I had corrective lenses, even though I was wearing contact lenses, I have glasses, and I've always worn them. But for me, even though the price had come down for LASIK so much so, it still didn't seem like, I had frame of reference. I mean, I've basically learned to live my whole life since age 8 with this, deficient, deficient vision. And so to me, it didn't seem that even then, maybe the trade-off would have been more than I realized, because I had come to, it was a part of my identity, as Terry alluded to, in one sense, and I guess I had been so far removed from what uncorrected vision looked like that it just didn't seem like it was necessarily that high of a reward. And so that was an interesting thing. So she insisted. Obviously, she won out. I got LASIK. I now have 20/20 vision. Yay, hooray, right? But I don't know that. I think that's something I have to be mindful of too when I give that decision. And so if I step away from the emotionality of sickle cell and what it may mean for my mortality or whatever the case may be, like that's an interesting bit of psychology for me. That I wasn't that pressed to get my eyes fixed, even though, in theory, there's much more upside than downside, right? When you make the same, when you change the parallel over to the sickle cell question. So I guess more food for thought.
Yeah.
That's a really good analogy. I like that.
Well, I now have glasses because I can't see, so I can relate. And it took 47 years, and plus a few more now they're actually on a string. So I
Right.
don't lose
There
them.
you go.
But what's also interesting, though, as a father now, is that, I understand what that struck in you. None of us wants to see our children in any kind of pain. But I also feel like the pain has been such an important part of my growth, my ability to navigate in the world, right? My capacity for resilience, right? And so as a parent, I do have to find sometimes what's that balance with my children where it's like you don't want them to get hurt in any way, but sometimes that pain is what they learn from, right? And am I depriving them from being who their fullest expression of if I intercede on every pain? You know what I mean? Now it's so philosophically, I'm sure that's different for different people, but I wonder too if sometimes as parents our instincts, not that they're wrong, but sometimes we may be denying our children an opportunity for
And there's a heavy
growth.
balance in that. Being in the pediatric setting, there is a great divide between, families and households that have, good support systems and those that don't. And so some of those lessons of resiliency and the lessons that make you the rose that grew in concrete, that doesn't always exist in every household. And so, I have great deep concerns for how those children learn to live with their sickle cell, and the impact that it has on them as young adults and moving towards adulthood, because you do see the difference between that good support system. You mentioned survivor's remorse, and I can't really call it survivor's remorse, but when my son goes into the hospital on the adult side, I did this experiment the first couple of times. I told him on the way there, he's in pain and everything. I'm like, don't tell him my name. Just don't tell him who I am, because I know that once they find out who I am, everything changes. And so there's this sense that, yes, I want the best care for my son, but I want the best care for everyone. And I can't tell how you really act if you treat me with privilege, because you know that I'm going to raise holy hell, and I know the people that I'm going to raise hell with, that is not the average patient, nor is that the average patient's experience. So there is that almost guilt, but how do you take that and translate that into policy change, into accountability, into improved outcomes across the board, not just for one or two or few.
Absolutely.
Great point.
All right, this a really great discussion for, just this question. And what I'm hearing overall is, a lot of people, I guess most of us are here on this panel, that, treatment, it seems to be the option that resonates, I guess, the best with us. Moving on to the next question I have here. So I guess in going through life, I don't know if you all had the why me question. I think I asked that a lot growing up in my childhood. Now it's not really something I ever think about and I kind of know the answer. But how do you answer the why me question, and how do you reason with the fact that you're living with sickle cell disease, and how do you make that okay for yourself?
I'll go.
Let me, go ahead, Terry.
I will say that I don't think in my youth I really ever asked that question. And I say that because later in life I actually read the Bible, and I read about I believe it's Lot, who had all these troubles, but he never questioned God, and in the end he was blessed, you know, 50 times over. And so, you know, I guess since I read that, I've always thought about the, you know, why haven't I ever questioned, like, why me? Why, you know, why do I have this? Instead, I've always been like, you know, I'll take it. I can bear this. I don't want to see my mother in pain. I don't want to see my father, my sister, no one in my family do I want to see them bear the pain that I have. So I always feel like, you know, I'd rather have it than any of these people. I'd rather have it than any of you, because, you know, like, I've been through it, and I mean, you've been through it too, but you know, I just feel like I can take it, and I'd rather take it than for anybody. I wouldn't wish this on my worst enemy. I truly believe sickle cell has to be one of the most painful things that you can have as a human being, and still, I guess, survive somehow. I believe that when we have these terrible crises, we actually go into something like shock. You know, because I once thought it's always the medications that are making me, you know, out of it. But I've had crises where I've had no medication.
Yeah.
And I still went to another place, another time. You know, space and time is just not the same anymore. And I'm like, that just sounds a lot like, you know, when a person's in shock or something. So it's very, very, very painful, and very, very, very like almost traumatic. And so I wouldn't want anyone else to have it. So no, I don't ask. I don't ask why me. I'm like, you know, okay, it is me. This is my burden to bear. I'm going to bear it, and I'm going to bear it well. And I'm going to bear it for hopefully as many people as God or the universe will allow me to bear it for. That's
You
all.
know, what you're saying reflects so much of how I've approached this. I've been asked a question multiple times, and my consistent response is, why not me? Particular to being the caregiver and watching and being an active participant in my son's sickle cell journey. And I say that from really a biblical point of view, is that apparently God saw something in me that knew I could handle it. Even if I don't look in the mirror and see that, I know that I just dig a little bit deeper. There are pieces of me that I have learned about me and my own resiliency as a parent, as a person, as a human, as a woman, that would not have happened had I not had the adversity come my way. And so I am a stronger person with it than I would have been without it. I am convinced of that. And so purpose reveals itself over time. And it is out of those experiences that my purpose was birthed.
That's fantastic.
I love it.
On the same sentiments of Terry and Ray, I can't remember a time in my youth that I questioned why. And I think part of the reason is that support that Ray talked about, right? So I came from a very extremely supportive family. I'm talking about my immediate household with my parents, but then my extended family. And in Philadelphia, growing up, we had this camp called Free to Be Me. And my peers, I will always have peers that experience different complications, you know, that I never experienced. I mean, I was in high school and my friends were getting double hip surgery. So I never asked why me, because I never, the things that I did experience with having sickle cell disease, I was just able to endure it. And it actually, pain wise, especially acute pain wise, it prepared me for motherhood and especially for labor. I wrote a post on Facebook the other day and it went viral because it was my truth. I, in comparison to an acute pain crisis, labor and contractions was a cakewalk for me. Like, it didn't even click that I
Would you
was.
say somebody had to tell you you were in
They had,
labor?
my mom and my doula and my midwife had to tell me I was in labor. And they only started looking at me because I was actually getting a massage in the hospital. And they kept saying, why you keep making those faces? And I was like, I don't know. It's just a little uncomfortable. And she said, how long you been feeling like that? And I said, I don't know, like the last 20 minutes. And they like, to hear you in labor. I'm like, oh. And then the waves got closer and closer. But even the waves of pain, I was able to ride it out. And I was walking in the hallway eating Doritos. Like, it did not click that this was the pain. And I think it's because my friends who have children way before me, when they told me about labor and contractions, it was, girls, the worst pain you ever feel in your entire life. And I've even heard growing up that, for women, labor and giving birth, you're actually like crossing this portal of death. And so to hear the woman in my family express that, experience that, and then when it's my turn, I don't feel that way. I feel like my acute pain crises, my delayed hemolytic transfusion reactions, that pain, I've blacked out from those pains. I've went through days where I was in those pains in the hospital and I could not remember anything. So giving birth to my daughter, it was just that. I birthed a human and nothing happened. It was like, my husband was standing on the wall. I told him, you might as well go take a nap. I'm okay. It was that, in comparison, I did not feel anything. So for me, my why, I never asked that question, why, because I just always saw people that, they were in a worse predicament than I ever had been. Even to this day, my body at 33, I still produce fetal hemoglobin. That has been my safety shield. So my hospitalizations, my pain, complications, I still make that. And that's why, when you look up my sickle cells or you get that percentage of sickling, it's always super low. My fetal hemoglobin is super high. So when you're asking about why, I've just known my purpose and for since I was diagnosed with sickle cell disease. And it was like, if I don't have it that bad as my friends, then I'm going to do something for my friends. I'm going to do something for my peers, right? Because they're going through so much that they can't amplify their voice. I'm going to amplify it for them, right? So tell me all your issues and I'm going to tell those doctors, right? Because I'm not the one that's home. I can have a career, but you can't. So we need to change this. And so that has been my why, instead of asking why me.
And I think again, sometimes cosign is enough to say it. Everybody had so many points, and I'm grateful, Terry, because I was just thinking about the book of Job, the story you were talking about right before this call. So this is almost like a confirmation. But in a sense, I definitely have drawn inspiration from Scripture. A number of verses I could go to right now, but not to sound sacrilegious, like just overly pious or whatever. But definitely, there's a lot of comfort there, including, I think was it Proverbs 3:6 or 3:7. It's a verse that in the King James translation, at least, actually says that, it will be like marrow to your bones. And I remember reading that and it was like a needle scratch moment, because it's almost like, did God actually have here in the Bible that he's going to give you like a bone marrow transplant? Like, I thought that was, I was like, wow. Anyway, go ahead, check that out if you guys get sent. Yeah, Proverbs 3:5, Proverbs 3.
Come on now.
3:6, 3:7.
I'm going.
But I think also to what Ray mentioned and what Tahira perfectly encapsulated with the discussion of her labor, is that with the right mindset, our adversity can become our advantage, right? And so the fact that you've endured crisis pain for so long, and I've heard stories, I think even Tosin talked about with her labor with twins was a walk in the park compared to the crisis pain, if you know Tosin Ola from Sickle Cell Warriors. So I've heard that story enough from women who've had children, and as a man, obviously, I don't have that frame of reference. But I think it's important too, because a lot of times as guys, we're socialized to tough it out and walk it off, and we maybe wait till the very last minute to go and get a crisis pain looked at. But we wouldn't dare act that way if we saw a woman in labor, right? And so the thing with sickle cell crisis pain is it's not limited to you as a man or a woman, right? And it's not just one time a year. For the most part, most people are going to be pregnant more than once, maybe twice in a year, but sickle cell crisis pain can happen multiple times. So the level of pain that we endure is immense. But I think, again, it can teach us resilience. It teaches us how to kind of roll with the various crises that life throws at us, to the point where COVID, sometimes we might be in a better position to adapt to like a pandemic, or we're used to our own personal worlds falling apart because of crisis pain strikes. And so when it happens on a bigger sense, potentially we're better equipped to deal with that. But in the same way that your adversity can become your advantage, I mean, I look at that Beyonce. I didn't really start learning to love Beyonce until the Lemonade album.
Right.
And what was great about that album was like she learned to squeeze all the lemons in her life so hard that she made lemonade. And it was such a dope album for all kinds of reasons, and formation at the Super Bowl 50th, everything. Anyway, I'm getting real nostalgic about it. But like, I think it's easy for us to run from or hide from the stigmas of our lemons or of our adversity, and sometimes miss the silver lining around that cloud, or how it benefits us. But I really do believe that my sickle cell is my superpower. And when you look at the belief around how sickle cell apparently came about, which Terry could probably speak to with a PhD in genetics, as an adaptation against malaria. Malaria is still out here, you know what I mean? And we complain that, rightfully so, that sickle cell hasn't received the funding and the research that it deserves for as long as it's been made aware of. But malaria has had a lot of money thrown at it, and they still can't tackle that one. And I mean, Bill Gates has given billions to malaria, and they still can't squash it. And so if my sickle cell is an adaptation to malaria, then right there, because I think the latest World Health Organization numbers on malaria, it still kills nearly 500,000 people a year. That's a lot of people that malaria still gets, despite all of our medical advancements, despite all the money thrown at it. And with this one tricky little mutation, you know what I mean? Those of us with the sickle cell, with with the recessive version of it, we do endure a lot of pain, but it confers a lot of advantage. And to use a football metaphor, sometimes it's a game of inches, you know what I mean? And so that little mutation might do a lot for our survival, especially given the parts of the world where we generally come from and where we're a diaspora from. And that should never be overlooked. And so sometimes we talk about the sickle cell story, unfortunately, almost exclusively in terms of the suffering, but there's a lot of advantage there that sometimes goes overlooked.
I also appreciate the fact that Terry, you pointed out that there's times that even without medication, it was almost like a transcendent experience. And then Phil, you talked about it being your superpower. Even as a caregiver, I can tell you that there were periods of time that I would go into autopilot, and people would even ask me, how'd you get through that? That was a really tough one. That would just take the average person out. I don't have a whole lot of memories of the specifics of some of those, because I go into this whole other state that quite honestly, it is I really believe that it's the Spirit of God that just allows me to do what I have to do in a right mind, but it does not preserve some of those other traumatic experiences that are happening in there. It doesn't mean that in the moment it's not painful, but it's like people who have multiple children. I had one, and I was like, "You went back for more?" No. So you don't remember some of the deepest pieces of it because of the strength that you have in it.
Yeah. First of all, let me again apologize to Job. I said lot. I'm sorry, Job. I'm doing wrong in heaven. And I know maybe perhaps we should say the pain is actually biblical. Maybe that'll help. And I also think that, you know, we were talking about the support system that you know, each of us has is so different. And I think that may also have a lot to do with that why me question. Because if you go like on Facebook now and you start going to these forums and you see how many people, you know, say sickle cell sucks, I hate it, you know, ruins my life and all this. And it just blew my mind to see all of this. All these people who were really dealing with, like, you know, tragedy, when I'm just like, you know, what do you mean? You know, like, because like I said, I was the poster child for the state of Virginia. In my youth, I grew up, you know, like going to see the mayor, going to see the governor. So I was, you know, almost like a little star. And so it framed the way that I viewed having sickle cell. Despite all these painful times that I had, I got treated like so well in school. They had my poster up right next to the cafeteria. For probably even after I left elementary school, it was still there. My mother was an amazing advocate when I was a child. And, you know, my father was right there as well. So some of this may be part of, as Tahir was saying, about that actual support that we actually are getting from our family, friends, and other things. Why we may or may not be saying, well, why me? And I mean, I think it's wonderful that, you know, everyone here has had more of I guess, a positive answer to the why me question. And so therefore we need to start thinking about how can we tackle all of these people who really are like, why me, you know, and who are miserable in their lives with sickle cell right now, because I believe that it doesn't have to be that way. You know, despite whichever phenotypes you have for sickle cell, I believe there are other things. You know, you're talking about what's going on in the home, and everybody's, you know, not roses in everybody's household. You know, those things do affect it also, but, you know, it may also have a lot to do with the support. It may actually have a lot to do, like, where you're growing up in a rural area or not. You know, the hospital that you have to go to specifically, because one hospital can be completely different than the next. And so I think all these things are important.
I wonder too, though, I wonder if we aren't beneficiaries of I'm not sure how far we are apart in age, Terry, and but I think
About 7 years.
About 10 years, and it's
About 7.
Oh, 7? Okay,
Mm-hmm.
gotcha. So I feel like when I was a kid coming up with sickle cell in California, it also felt like, you know, I think all of us on this call are probably beneficiaries of a great tribe, right? A great support system, and all that. But I wonder if, when I look kind of back historically, I almost look kind of fondly on like the 60s, and this is Jim Crow era. So nobody should look fondly on Jim Crow era, but I think in terms of sickle cell advocacy, it's almost like the community we had each other's backs a little bit better when it came to that. And the way the Panthers would advocate, and they were having testing in the community and doing like things like that, was something that I feel like it feels like today we're so much further away from, right? And I think, unfortunately, I recall maybe being 6 or 7 years old when Meteor Man movie came out. That was like a star-studded, like Bill Cosby, Robert Townsend, like so many stars were in that film. And the whole Sickle Cell California Foundation, we got to go to the premiere and we got to see all these people. And it was like, I don't know when Sickle Cell had that kind of support, where we were getting support from like such visible people. You know what I mean? And so I wasn't anybody's poster child, but it felt like we got much more love as a community, not just within ourselves, amongst ourselves, but I mean, from the broader Black community in a way that we don't seem to get now.
Phil, that's why I say, and I said it in our conversations when we were talking about the for us, by us, we have a tendency when we put too much dependence on external institutions and external ways, we have a tendency to then take our hands off of it and release our own responsibilities in that. And what was different between then and now is that when we held that ownership, we also held ownership for those outcomes. We've now put ownership of the outcomes on the healthcare system. We have to own the outcomes. At the end of the day, I'm not saying that they shouldn't be held accountable. I'm not saying that they shouldn't do better and be better, because they should. However, in spite of all of what we're not getting, what can we give ourselves? Exactly. And we have to get back to that conversation, because if we are to do justice to the work that the Panthers did in making sure that they brought this to the legislator, that they brought this, we owe it. We owe it to those who came before us and fought and gave blood, sweat, and tears to make sure that we could participate in that care, but we still own it.
Yeah. And we're in this moment right now, right, where it's like Black Lives Matter, and yeah, George Floyd, it struck a chord with you for a reason, and I think it's rippling out beyond just our community, but certainly if we're making that declaration, we, in a sense, have to teach people to value our lives in the same way we do, right? I mean, nobody's going to value you more than you value yourself,
Are we
right?
all still here?
And to the extent that we look out at the broader American society and feel as though we are not valued, we really do need to, there is an onus of responsibility to look internally. It doesn't absolve a lot of the mistreatment we get, but we do have to look within and ask ourselves, are we demonstrating that we value ourselves and our community to the degree that we used to? And again, that's almost a perverse thing, not to celebrate anything about that era, but the idea that we knew we were all we had, we knew we couldn't take our hands off the wheel. We knew that if it was gonna be anything done, it was gonna happen. And to the point where, you get a guy like Richard Nixon, it gets to his level and he signs off on, additional funding and research for sickle cell, even back then. And now we're at a time where we think we don't, we question whether or not we have that political power, but it does come from that community. And so you nailed it. The for us, by us is so simple and so and perfectly encompasses what we really need to do, not just within ourselves as sickle cell. I think we are doing that great, but I think we somehow need to figure out a way to galvanize across the African American community while we're in this Black Lives Matter moment, such that this is something that we can see, not just within sickle cell, but any other disparities, health disparities. It needs to ripple out.
Yes.
I truly believe that sickle cell, when it comes to health disparities, especially with all the systematic oppression and injustice that occurs within the healthcare system, dismantling that, sickle cell disease can be the model, because we've experienced all of that from every facet with living with sickle cell disease, whether it's in pediatrics, whether it is as adults, whether it's navigating the health insurance world, all of that we've experienced, and even those who have sickle cell disease but are mothers, and on the flip side of maternal mortality, right? So it's like that double risk. I'm pregnant and I have a chronic illness, and so from the jump, I'm I'm high risk, right? So, but then I'm Black. So you put all these things together, it's like I'm a triple threat. How do we make sickle cell disease that model of breaking down this system, right? So we use our illness to dismantle everything, right? And when you mentioned, Phil, the health disparities, I immediately thought of how COVID has ran through our community. The things like diabetes and high blood pressure, all of those things that run rampant in our community that we still can't get a handle on. And what I've just noticed, whether it's social media and especially in Philadelphia and the Delaware Valley, people just really don't know about sickle cell disease, and it trips me out. And one of my mentors was telling me back in the 90s, they did like a pop-up of a sort right on. So we have this this corridor in Philadelphia. It's called 52nd Street. It's basically, where all of the vendors are at, like on the street. You can go there, you can get anything, you can shop till you drop. But it's in the Black community, and they said they did this pop-up video where they actually went to 52nd Street, stood out there with a camera, and did a Q&A with people who walked up and down and just asked them, do you know what sickle cell disease is? Do you know what sickle cell trait is? And the answers that they got, and they did the same thing in Kumasi, Ghana. And in comparison, right, you're talking about a country where the healthcare system is not like ours, but over there, they know their trait status. They can tell you mom, dad, auntie, uncle are AAAS. My cousin over this side is SC. They can tell you all of that. And in comparison to over here, people were saying, I think that's something that my aunt got from her boyfriend when he was in jail. And I was like tripped up by the answers. Like, so you mean to tell me that happened in the 90s, and in 2020, I'm still going this hard in basic sickle cell education in the community, and I'm getting answers like, so how do you get it? And I'm still like, what isn't translating? Like, what isn't transferring? So the awareness and the education has to be literally pumped into our community, so that way we can get the support, right, to do these FUBU type of initiatives, so that way I don't have to, as a organization founder, I don't have to turn to my government like, you should be giving me this and that. I just, and you own me, right? I would rather turn to my community like, this is what's going on, right? These are the things that we need. This is the model that we've put together. This is how we can use your support, right? Without having to go so hard and feel like I'm pulling teeth out of my own people because they just don't get it.
And go ahead, Ray. You want to jump in?
I want to be fair, because yes, I do think that there is a level of functioning that is on this panel. But when you look at the hierarchy of needs, right? Why aren't our people leaning into their health? Why aren't they paying more attention? Why is it so hard to engage them? The level of poverty that exists, the level of concern for housing, for safety, the level of other concerns that have allowed health to take the back seat. That's why, even as community-based organizations, it really can't just be connecting them to care. If we're not also addressing concrete needs, they don't have the wherewithal to put their health first. When they are trying to make sure there's food on the table, they don't have the wherewithal to do that. And so, yes, we have to continue to show up to provide the education, but we also have to tear down the walls that keep them from being able to absorb and apply the very things that we are working to educate them with.
Yes, ma'am.
She went to the hierarchy of needs. Put the Abraham Maslow on them, right?
Can't ignore it.
I gotta eat first.
Well, that's fair, and I think in a sense, I'm glad I let you go first, because you probably, in a certain sense, preempted or maybe rebutted a little bit the point that I was going to make about why what Tahira's comments were almost even more of an indictment, because here in the States we do have, I believe it's universal at this point, newborn screening for sickle cell, right? And so the fact that we have that here, I can speak more confidently on Nigeria, that I think maybe there are individual states that have newborn screening out of all 37 states in Nigeria, but I couldn't speak to Ghana And so but the experience would be similar in Nigeria. You would have way more people who know what their genotype is and know what their status is and could speak to it. Now, whether or not they always do is a different thing, because there's still a lot
Right.
of stigma, at least in
Yeah.
Nigeria, about it.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of people who have it and don't want to tell people because as I
Same in the
alluded to
Caribbean.
earlier,
It's a
dating is
curse.
hard enough, and it
Yep.
might disqualify you from, whatever. And but if here in the United States, we have it as a policy where there is universal newborn screening, I do think there is a breakdown, unfortunately, wherein when those results get delivered, and if a person does not have sickle cell but ends up having the trait, and I actually heard this, I believe, from Kim Smith Whitley, who's I think still in your area, right? She's still out there in Philadelphia, and
Right. My homegirl.
I think this was a few years back, but she was saying that there's something that happens there wherein the communication that, hey, you have the trait and these are the implications for what that means. I think a lot of times they're simply receiving, oh, you have the trait, but you don't have to worry about it because it's not sickle cell. And so then it doesn't, they are already competing for just basic, the things at the base of the pyramid, and that's already difficult enough. But this is still a vital information, and the way that information gets delivered, unfortunately, doesn't necessarily impress the urgency that it should. And so I think as a community, we end up a lot less engaged than we should be about this issue, or that we could be, because those needs, my hierarchy of needs, they're not all met in West Africa either. I mean, you know what I mean? So there's people here that even though they're struggling, they're not struggling to the degree that our folks are there, and they still have that awareness.
Well, let me just blow your mind talking about sickle cell trait and being able to educate people who even have trait status. In the state of Minnesota, we did not start a state. The state did not start informing families who gave birth to a child with sickle cell trait. I oftentimes say, you tell me, what year do you think it was? I'll just tell you, 2015.
Wow.
15. Right?
Oh,
so
what?
we have an entire community who may have never been told that they have sickle cell trait. Now, I'm pretty sure that my Black culture, your Black culture, if didn't nobody tell you have it, that just means you don't. No, I have to tell people all the time, your family bigger than 12 or 13, somebody either doesn't know or isn't talking. So we also have to recognize that some of the disparities that exist, because we're going to go back to those disparities, we're going to go back to,
right,
how well we are educated within the healthcare system at opportune times that have been dismissed. And there were opportunities to address this, but that newborn screening, that is an absolute advantage, to be told from birth that you have this. You have people who are 7, 8, some people were not diagnosed until 12, 13, depending on their age, that were sent through the mill trying to figure out what was going on, or growing pains, or all these other things. And yet we can find out when our child is 2 or 3 weeks old, so that we can begin to make informed decisions from there. But the information has to be given to us so that we can do that.
Screening is not enough. They have to communicate it. If they're only letting people know in 2015, that's definitely a problem.
Crazy.
Yeah.
Can I clarify something real quick before I guess we're gonna move on soon? Clarify something so that any people watching this later don't misunderstand. And that was the sickle cell malaria connection that Phil was talking about. And so basically, sickle cell existed. Somebody somewhere in Africa, had a child, and this child had a change in their DNA, and that change ended up giving them this allele for sickle cell disease. Now, malaria also just existed on its own. What happened, and what's important, is that people who became infected with malaria, if they carried this gene, they were less susceptible to death.
right.
And those people who were less susceptible to death were the ones that really had the trait. They were just carriers. They had one sickle gene and one normal gene. And so the people really who had the disease back then, of course, they were probably dying, right, at a very young age because they didn't have the health care, you know, thousands and thousands of years ago, right? And the people who were normal and healthy, they were dying from the malaria. So all the people that were really living were the carriers. So it's why they say that there's an advantage being a carrier. And so therefore, this actual allele, that's S gene, it grew and grew and grew in frequency within the population. And that's why it's in so many people because it was sparing the people who carried the gene from dying from malaria. All right, that's all.
I'm so glad I didn't step into your lane with that, because Terry, you did a way better justice than I.
I'd like to do a time check to see how you guys are doing on time. Terry, it sounds like you have to go pretty soon.
I don't have to go anywhere.
Oh, you don't? Oh, okay. Just kidding. All right. Is everybody all right on time and everything? I want to be respectful. I know you guys are all 3 hours ahead of me.
I have about 30 minutes.
You have 30 minutes? Okay, let's ask a good one. Which one should we, was there anyone on the list that you really wanted to talk about?
Yes.
I have here
Let's talk about Sickler.
The term Sickler, and then I have, okay, we're gonna do that one then. All right, so.
Well, you starting something tonight.
Trying to get it all in.
Get it all in.
So other diseases have nicknames, such as individuals with cystic fibrosis calls themselves CFers. What do you think about the term sickler? Do you think it's a word that should be reclaimed or kind of left by the wayside?
So
I prefer warriors, but I
adjust myself in the chair. You know, I think that we have to remember that we all live in the world in Black and brown bodies, and as Black and brown individuals, it behooves those who create the narratives to give us labels. And there is an entire dog whistle politics around, you know, using these key words that mean something to one person and something else to another, but when you assign them to particular groups. For example, if you have something that is frowned upon in society, you know, it's often said that, you know, you've been given a label. But if you have something that is celebrated in our society, you're given a title, right? They're kind of the same thing, right? But the narrative around them is very different. So when we already carry the narrative of being less than, of being, and I don't subscribe, nor do I need their approval to be who I am, and I don't have to prove it to anybody. However, I know that that is how they shape their narratives, and that's how they use their dog whistle language to describe us without the less knowing understanding what they are truly, the box they're putting us in. So words matter, and the CFers, as they would prefer to be called, may feel a sense of identity and community around that. And I would challenge us to be mindful of the whole reclaiming certain words. We know that the N word is used as, and it's the A versus the ER and versus the narrative is the narrative that works against us, not for us. And we actually contribute to that narrative by continuing to use it flippantly. So, I just feel the same thing about the word sickler. I am more than my diagnosis, and I don't want that myself, my son, or anyone else to be known by a healthcare condition. No different than I don't want to be known by any particular degree I have. Is it nice? Is it part of who I am? But it doesn't define me. My humanity, if I didn't have any of that, I am still worthy. I am still valuable. I still am meant to be here.
Do I need to add anything after Ray? Because she just taught, like, that was a whole sermon. we I despise the word sickler. I despise it. I despise it because I hate this culture that we have of trying to take a word that never was meant to empower anyone. The term sickler was just as Ray said, it was a term given to us because, especially in the U.S., because they already had this stigma on us as sickle cell is a black disease. So I'm not going to say niggas, but they sicklers, right? And I know a sickler is that black person over there that's coming in, and that's what. And so the whole trying to change the narrative and change the narrative to empowerment up with this word, it's just null and void for me because you don't have to do that. You don't have to link yourself to that word in order to stand out and so in order to be an advocate, in order to amplify your voice. You are much more than sickle cell disease, even if that's a big part of your identity, right? I am much more than sickle cell disease SS, right? And it stands true with everything that I do. I took over 5,000 young boys to the Million Man March, to the 20th anniversary of the Million Man March as an activist. That had nothing to do with my sickle cell disease. That's all because I just know how to mobilize and organize. I am much more than sickle cell disease. So why would I attach a label to myself when I do much more, than that? I'm not a sickler. I don't sit here and sickle all day. That's not what I am. And I always correct healthcare workers when they put that label on me.
I was
And
gonna ask, what about the people who say it harmlessly, and then also just
I
subculture,
still do it.
No
I don't
harm.
know if
Yeah,
They
in
say
Ghana call
ignorantly, not
themselves sicklers,
harmlessly.
in Nigeria
yeah.
we call
And
ourselves sicklers.
yeah, and I can tell you, I had an experience. It was Christmas Day in Trinidad, and I got real sick, and I had to go. And I had the option of going to the public hospital or going to a private doctor. And my auntie was like, get her to the public hospital because it's closer and it looks like her hemoglobin is dropping. I was extremely sick, and I had this little teeny weeny nurse come in. She said, "How long you been a sickler?" And it everything in me, I popped up. I was wide awake now. And I was like, "What you just call me?" I was like, "I am not a sickler." And my dad told me to calm down because he was like, "It's the culture." So this is the culture and the Caribbean. And I was like, "No, Dad, like I'm not calming down. Like that's wrong, right? Y'all calling me a nigga to my face." Because that's how I felt when she said sickler to me and asked me how long have I been a sickler. So one, you was ignorant just on sickle cell disease, period, asking me how long I had it. And then two, you was ignorant and calling me a sickler. So you placed the label on me. So it's just that whole throw it in the trash. I want us to just trash it.
All right, I'm gonna mess this up. But I'm not gonna totally mess it up. So I still prefer warriors to sickler.
Yeah.
And my reason being that to use the word, my issue with sickler is just that it has the word sick in it, and to link that to an attribute of my identity, just even subliminally to use that over and over is almost just like
Like
it's
the word
almost like,
crisis.
yeah, well, yeah, it's like, it's almost like to just associate sickness with yourself. And the thing I constantly try to convey to people with young adults with sickle cell that I mentor is that you have it. I have sickle cell. It is one dimension of my identity. It is not all of my identity. Now, that being said, here's where I'm going to muck it up a little bit. There's a part of me that, as I was alluding to kind of with the lemons and whatever, like it's as much, I have to recognize that there is as only the power that we give it, right? And so I love the distinction you made about Ray, about titles versus labels, right? And I think a perfect example is the notion of like a frequent flyer. Under any normal circumstances, that's a sign of status, that's a sign of prestige, that's a sign of, you are a person who has arrived. But the moment we end up in the ER, that term gets applied to us as a pejorative.
That's
So,
right.
so the same word, it could be sickler, it could be frequent flyer, it could be used as a positive or as a negative, and it's only in the power that we give it, right, that it now becomes, so in a certain sense, we decide whether or not we are going to receive it as a positive or as a negative. And so that might be a little too close to home. So I always like to give an example that's kind of, we can maybe take a step back. There's this band that was in some legal proceedings and went to the Supreme Court. Their members are primarily Asian, and the name of the band was called the Slants. And so if you know the history, slants would be a pejorative term to apply to Asians, but they were trying to essentially repurpose it and say, no, this is going to mean what we say it means. In the same way, I think the Black community, when you talk about using the N-word, how you use it, it's a repurposing of something that might have been initially harmful into something that is something different. Whether they actually achieve that, I think they won their case in the Supreme Court, if that matters. But I know this is a debate that could go on forever, but I'll say for me
Don't
personally,
get me started.
I'm less hung up on the use of the term sickler because I just choose to not give it that power. But in as much as there are people who may not draw that distinction, I don't want to wish any form of sickness or anything close to it to them. So
I guess I have to give an answer.
Did I sufficiently muck it up? I see grimaces coming from Ray to here. I'm like, they're like, like I hear what you're saying, but no. No.
I still love you though.
Terry, break the tie. No, it's not really a tie, but where you
to disagree with your family.
I think my opinion is almost unique because I hadn't heard of the term really before until I was in my early 30s, I believe. Wow. Hadn't really heard it. And if I did, it may have been, once or twice, never in any large amount. And so it was actually a very good friend of mine when I was in North Carolina. While I was at Duke, I lived in a house that was cut into apartments, and it was called the Bridges Points Apartments. And people who were transitioning from, into adulthood, it was a transitional place. It didn't really end up that way, but that's what it was supposed to be. But anyway, all the people that lived there had sickle cell. And one of my very good friends, probably one of my best friends now, he hated the word. And I was like, but why? And I think it just doesn't sound good. Kind of like Phil is saying, it's got the word sick in it. And I think that really does bother people, the way that it sounds. And the way, even when I think about it, I'm like, oh, that does kind of sound, but I had nothing where, the word sound like a negative, word that someone was using towards me. I didn't have any of that in my life before. So, I was like, what are you talking about, man? Like, why is it so bad? And so I think that does, so when I hear a lot of other people talk about the term and how it has its history and it labels you, I'm like, well, Warriors is a label, is it different because someone else gave it, or that if we named ourselves Warriors, is that what the difference is? Or I don't get it.
What if the nurses in the ED said, hey, there's a warrior in room 7 versus, hey, there's a sickler in room 9? I just think that it shapes the way that our society moves and the way that our society communicates. I think that, again, words matter, both for the person using them and the person receiving them. And just because you can receive it different doesn't mean that it doesn't negatively empower the person using it.
It empowers the person that's using it. Okay. So, I and the only place that I ever figured that, you would really hear the word would be actually in the hospital. So basically it's doctors and nurses giving this term, and therefore it's negative because it means black. Like, I don't understand what is it pointing to? What is it? I don't understand how
It's a medical dog whistle. It's a medical dog whistle.
Why can't I just be
empower?
Right, but why can't I just be, as you know, in the same scenario that Ray just gave? There's a patient who has sickle cell disease in room 9.
That's fine.
Right?
Absolutely.
Or Tahira is in room 9.
That's fine too.
Right? So you don't even have to give me no label. You don't even say my name.
I agree. I actually agree with that above all. But when I heard the first time I heard people using the word warriors, I didn't actually like it.
I kind of still. That's why I might muck it up there if we had a warrior.
I'm still on the fence.
I was like, you know what? If there's going to be something, I'll take that one. I can ride with that.
Right.
Right. I can ride with it, but I'm still on the fence with warrior, and that's just my own individual thing. I don't feel like a warrior every day. It's for you to tell me or call me that, but that's my own.
I thought that was just me to hear.
No.
I don't like patient. You know, like, especially since I spent most of my life outside the hospital, and I'm still referred to as a patient. I'm a patient in the hospital, but I live most of my life outside the hospital. So
we made that a point with like our content that we were putting out as Crescent, and especially like on our website, we call ourselves survivors. We refer to our peers as survivors, and that just comes that I feel like that's what we're doing. You know, we're surviving, we're striving. You know, we're thriving with sickle cell disease, and that's the energy that we want to put out there, right? I'm not a patient every day, right? I'm not a patient right now. I'm not in the hospital, but I am someone surviving sickle cell disease. I am someone living with sickle cell disease. I am someone striving daily, you know, with my entire life, living with sickle cell disease. So, and thriving, you know, I do a lot and thriving. So, you know, and that's the type of energy I want to put out there. And that's the type of energy I want to receive. So when you place a word like sickler on me, it takes me to another place. And I just automatically get images of the
sickle.
The tool is sickle. And then just like you said, Phil and Terry, it has the word sick in it, and right now I don't feel sick,
right?
So I don't even want that label nowhere near me.
And I think
because it can turn into a mindset.
Yeah,
right.
That's
it changes your whole mindset. Psychologically, you go somewhere else, you know, and it's like someone dropping a seed into you, you know, subliminally, and now you then went into a depression mode and everything. Leave that energy far away from me.
So that's the main thing again for me, and it's just kind of a reiteration of the point I was making. The fact that it has the word sick in it is almost like, for one, it's almost this suggestion, and again, it may be subliminally just via the use of the word, but it's the suggestion that because you have it, you are somehow not viable. You know what I mean? That you can't survive and that you can't thrive, and that is not. I don't even want to infect anybody's thinking with that notion, but. You know, I was a philosophy major, so my philosophy of language explanations aside, the reason point why this will probably end the debate is that it's not HIPAA compliant, right? And so if the nurses are using it in the ER to refer to instead of saying somebody with sickle cell is in that room, well, that's a violation of HIPAA when they could have said your name, you know, and so it's interesting that for CFers, they've gravitated towards it, right? I think that to me underscores the notion that you can make it a positive and it doesn't have to be a negative, even though it's a violation of HIPAA, that's what they're okay with identifying in that way. But I think, so that HIPAA component is what ends it. But warrior for me is better in the sense it's not inherently a HIPAA violation. There are other chronic illnesses that refer to themselves as warriors. So to use that doesn't necessarily give away what your diagnosis is. And it could also be referring to you but being a veteran. You know what I mean? It could be, you know, so it's vaguer in that sense, but also the mindset is one where you're potentially much more a warrior, you know, could be victorious. You know what I mean? Whereas a sickler is like, it's already defeatist in its mindset So,
Good
you
point.
know, to use it or not to use it, these are things to consider. They're interesting, but I do have my issues with HIPAA though. If our philosophical conversation gets to this, maybe this is due for a part two. I think HIPAA sometimes, in some ways, can promote stigmatization, right? We do have to. The fact if we don't talk about it, or if we are restricting how we talk about what we have, can inadvertently do that, right? Can inadvertently contribute to the sense of stigma. And we know that that's from the newborn screening conversation, that's a challenge too. So HIPAA, that's not to say my view that HIPAA is 100% sacrosanct, but if that's how the nurses are going to refer to it, they should be leery of that.
That's an interesting concept. That'll keep me up tonight thinking about that what you
Yeah.
literally just said about HIPAA. And I'm like, huh, yeah.
Good point. As well as the juxtaposition of sickler and warrior. You know how you said one is very empowering, and the other one is like you're already lost. Like that's an interesting dichotomy too. That's the way that you said it. I was like, that's very cool. I like that. And I wonder if whoever came up with the word warrior did it on purpose almost. It seems like it's almost purposeful. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
Yeah,
That's a whole different path that we can talk about with words.
yeah. So I have two more questions, Tahira.
Yeah, I'm on.
I don't
think
want
I'm
you to
good.
go. Okay.
I think I'm good. I think my toddler is being handled. So
thank you. Tell whoever's there. Thank you. Thank you. This is a really great discussion. The two ones I'll just let you know right now beforehand are the ones with two people dating who may not be compatible genetically, and then the last one, the best part about living with sickle cell disease, or having it. So I want to end on a good note. So the first one is, many people find comfort in people who completely understand their experiences because they live it. What are your thoughts on two people dating despite both having sickle cell disease or a sickle cell trait? And what are the considerations for having a child? This is a hot topic within the forums, within the comments and everything. So, and I know one of you in particular has a stance on it that isn't necessarily ever articulated, and so I'm looking forward to hearing from all of you on your opinions on that. Whoever wants to go first. I would say Terry, if you want to go first. I know you have.
I'll go first. I just want to make sure I don't forget anything.
Oh, we can come back to you too.
So I believe I was always told, by doctors and nurses or just any people that were involved with sickle cell disease, do not, have a child with someone else with sickle cell disease. And so originally that's the way that it was almost, I was conditioned to believe that, and so it wasn't until I started to be more of a free thinker in life that, I really was like, I realized it really says to me that it's almost saying hate yourself. Almost like don't have somebody like you. You don't belong in this world. And that really, really bothers me, because despite the pain that I have and the suffering, I'm very glad to be here. I'm glad my parents had me and that they didn't know at the time that they were both carriers of this trait. But when other people say, you shouldn't have a child with sickle cell, I feel like one, is saying, you should hate yourself, and that there's something, wrong with you. And I've heard other people but also, I'm not a parent again. And as I've said before, my support system has been much different. So I can understand when other people have have, different opinions about it. And plus, there are people who have sickle cell much worse than I do. It's variable about how much people suffer on a regular basis. So it's just, it has bothered me a lot when I hear people, carry this flag saying don't have a child with sickle cell. Who else, if somebody's going to have a child with sickle cell, who else would be a better parent to have somebody with sickle cell than me? Nobody. There is no one than me and this woman that I love who either has a trait or the illness who also understands it. Like, I don't understand how there could be any parents better. Also, I don't think that the gene or the allele should be eradicated from the world, which there are people who think that. We need to get rid of y'all. You know what I'm saying? So you don't need to be here easy way, just to make sure y'all don't make any more of you. So it's almost in a sense of saying, you shouldn't be here, shouldn't have any babies, which doesn't sound very good to me at all either. So, I mean, I may have more to jump in along this conversation, but I really would like to hear what other people had to say about it, because it's something that has, it's got me upset before in meetings, hearing what people had to say about this this topic right here. So, next.
So as not to muck it up, I'm just gonna jump in and co-sign. I don't know where the ladies are gonna come from on this one, but I agree with you in the sense that I have been conditioned also to hear that, you want to know your partner's genotype so that you don't have a child with sickle cell. And as a child, okay, I understand that advice comes from a place of what seems to be love, right? And I understand, especially when caretakers, they don't want to see you suffering at all, right? Just why they don't, they'd rather just not deal with it. But I think the implications, the eugenic implications of it, this idea that you need to clean out the gene pool, and so to do that, just don't have any more kids until whatever, that's problematic for me. That's problematic for me, probably because it does strike directly to the core of my identity and who I am. And I'm viable. I'm not, I'm not condemned. It's not a death sentence. I live in the world. I survive in the world. I thrive in the world. And I think even the fact that we didn't get into this, maybe this is another genetic conversation, but the haplotypes, the fact that the sickle cell mutation didn't just happen once, it happened on at least 4 separate occasions, twice in Africa, I think once in the Middle East, once in India, in the Indian subcontinent. Sickle cell was meant to be here. This mutation was meant to be here. God, whoever, the universe intended for this to be here, precisely because of the discussion, the sidebar we had on malaria. It's a very real thing, and any adaptation to that is still necessary. And so all the more reason why it seems baffling to suggest that we should want to get rid of the allele or whatever. And so I think what the best thing in terms of that advice, in terms of knowing the genotype or whatever, is qualifying it. If you're going to have somebody that, or you're going to proceed to having a child with somebody who you might have sickle cell with, make sure that you have the requisite education to understand all that it entails and all that it means to manage it, and make sure that you have the adequate support. You make sure you have that, you are aligned with the right tribe that can help sustain you. And so I shared these similar sentiments actually at a Corey conference a couple weeks ago. So I'm glad to hear Terry, as a geneticist, with somebody who's a doctorate in genetics, have a similar viewpoint, because I have no such background, so mine's just completely out of my where. But I do think I don't see why, if at the time when I was born, the expectation was that somebody with this diagnosis couldn't live into beyond adolescence, much less into adulthood. And I'm here at 40 and have had a great career and had, college and master's degree and 2 great kids and all these things. I have every expectation now, given the number of treatments that are on the horizon, that the next generation of kids coming up with sickle cell would have an even fuller life than I've been able to enjoy. And so why shouldn't we give them a shot? You know what I mean? Like, why should we look to, you know, kill the baby in its crib with that mindset? But anyway, enough devil's advocate. I'm open to alternate opinions.
You want to go, Ray?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
I, as a mom now, my opinion is a lot different from you all, and it's because for much of my life, I have done things because of the trauma that I've experienced with sickle cell disease. So I've pushed myself a lot harder than my peers because I have sickle cell disease. I outwork my colleagues because I have sickle cell disease, right? And so it's interesting to see my daughter do things without having this traumatic illness on her back as a burden that I could not do, right? Even at 3, right? And so, and I like seeing her literally, her potential, not even just her potential, what she does now at 3, I'm excited to see her grow when she's 10, when she's 13, when she's 20, without having this burden of having this illness, because she's going to be so much more amazing than I am. And I'm her mom. But it's because I've worked extra harder so people wouldn't say, you can't do it because you have sickle cell. You won't be able to do it because you have sickle cell disease. Or I didn't finish med school like you, Terry, because sickle cell got in the way. And that's the God honest truth. So for her, looking at her, it's like, I want, if I can control what traumas she experiences, then that's what I'm gonna do as her mom. And if I am in knowing that ahead of time, knowing that I can ask this man, what run in your family besides sickle cell disease, right? So I can know at 19, my child might start acting crazy because you got schizophrenia in your family, right? But all of these different stigmas or these different things, I want to know that so I can prevent that from happening. If I can, and then it's just also my own individual part of my character. I'm kind of a control freak. So if I can control the worst outcomes, I'm going to do that, right? For my family. And then just and just like you all having this great support system, I don't want to overburden my support system. I don't want my support system having to worry about having to take care of me, and now they also got to worry about having to take care of my daughter now, right? When I'm in the hospital, then she may get sick and we both in the hospital. Now we got to figure out things. Or when I'm in the hospital, who's going to take care of her? All of these different things I thought about before I became a mom, before I became a wife, because I knew how I wanted my life to go with living with sickle cell disease. I knew how my life was already going with my illness, and I knew that I wanted to be here as long as possible raising my daughter, and I wanted to be raising her without any hiccups that I can control. So if that means I got to ask you 1,000,001 questions before we get married to make that decision, then that's what I'm going to do. But you brought up an interesting point, Phil, that I never really thought of because of that conditioning, and that was the eugenics part. I never even went that route with the education that I received in pediatrics of, this is what you need to know when your family planning. You want to know the genetics of your partner. But that's an interesting point. But I still feel like as a mom, I want my daughter to react not off of trauma. And I feel like that has been much of my life. Even if I had a great life, much of my life has been reacting off of the trauma that I've experienced. And so that's where I stand at. I'm interesting to hear Ray's perspective. But Phil, you want to have me researching now, like eugenics and sickle cell disease.
Yeah, the whole ethnic cleansing, like you almost shut me down right there.
Right? I was like, oh, I didn't even go there.
Yeah. This is an ethical question, and we have to be very careful stepping into that space. I've worked with a lot of families and a lot of parents who carry this sense of guilt. So first and foremost, I want to speak to whomever might be listening to this and watching this to say, you didn't know what you didn't know. It is not a fault thing.
That's right.
It is not your fault that you had children with sickle cell. It is not your fault that you were born with sickle cell. It is not someone else's fault that you were born with sickle cell. What I advocate for, and this is across the board, whether it be a new therapy, whether it be, hydroxyurea is one of these ethical issues for some. What I advocate for is making an informed and responsible decision. We make a lot of emotional decisions. We make a lot of historical decisions. We make a lot of decisions that are not necessarily based in having all of the facts that we need. I believe that, to hear well before now, we are kindred in so many ways. If I can control the outcome, trust and believe, I'm going to do everything I can to do just that. However, I also recognize, my brother and I are 10 months and 25 days apart. You know what that means? I was the 6-week checkup baby. So, and at that point, my mama was like, this whole we don't believe in birth control issue, we got to talk about that because we're not going to do this. So you have to know what is right for your family, and you have to know all of the responsibilities that's part of being informed that come with that decision. And I have to leave it at that because there are too many layers and too many factors that play into what is right for one household versus what is right for another.
100% agreed.
Yeah, I've thought about in my response, in my views about this, I've thought about the thing of like, okay, well, what if your child hates you, because you did this, to him or her? And, it's kind of the same. My mother, the other day, I was talking about still having children, and I couldn't believe sounded like she was trying to talk me out of it because of my age. And all of the things she said were based out of fears that nobody even knows yet. Like, will your kid be mad that you're the old dad? And I'm like, that we don't even know if that's gonna. We have no clue.
Right.
So in the same sense, it's almost as if thinking, well, I thought about, where my child could hate me, and I was like, no, get that out of your mind. And in the end, to me, it would be about love. Do I love this woman or not? So that we can have children together. And because, and it's also like y'all were saying about, it's about knowing, really. It's about knowing your status and knowing, what the possibilities could be, of your child having sickle cell. I think that's what's hugely important in kind of, embedded in this question, is really that people need to know so that they're not caught off guard, and with all these responsibilities now. But, if I were one to know ahead of time, I think I would be prepared for it. And again, I would think that, no one can take care of this child better than I can, because I have definitely been through the wire. And also in this time frame, in this year, there's all these treatments and the cures coming down the path and everything. So, it's almost asking a different question now than when I was born. You know what I'm saying? So like, even I actually went to grad school, not med school.
Sorry, Terry.
Even going to school, I was like, should I do something in sickle cell? And I was like, you know what? They're about to cure this thing. I can go and do something else. And I did. And honestly, I actually felt guilty later once I started seeing all these groups on Facebook and seeing how many people were still dying.
Mm.
That broke my heart to realize how many people, because I did not know that all these people were still dying from it. And it's dead wrong that people are still dying from, kidney failure, with sickle cell. That should not be happening in this day and age whatsoever. I don't know. I don't know what their excuse could be, what their reasoning is. It doesn't make any sense to me at all. But yes, I just think that, again, it's about knowing and people being able to make a really informed decision about what they're going to do about it. So I think that, thank goodness Minnesota now has screening, because everyone needs to be screened, not just here, but abroad also. And since I guess we're about to soon wrap up, I wanted to just jump back to one more thing, if you don't mind. And that's when we were talking about the cures versus treatments questioning. And, one of the things that I think I have a problem with also kind of goes to the eugenics that Phil mentioned. And that's that in many of these cures, you have to you get sterilized. Right? You can't have children. And I think it's dead wrong that they're asking 20-year-olds, 18-year-olds, and it's probably children younger than, even if their parents are consenting for them. I don't think that's ethically correct to have someone making a decision like that at such a young age. So actually, they should be offering this to the people who are less plastic, who's already gone through the having their children and all that going on. So it's a huge, huge sacrifice that's being made, for people to choose these therapies and treatments. And we're so vulnerable, we're such a vulnerable population. People be on Facebook and they'll say things like, you all in your feelings and everything. I was like, everybody's in their feelings that has sickle cell. We are a vulnerable population. So it's almost like they're preying on this vulnerable population to go ahead and do these studies and go through these treatments. And then once they perfect it, are they still going to be, let's go sickle cell? Mm-hmm. Or are they going to move on to things that, more of the population has? You know what I'm saying? Like, are we the guinea pigs? Like,
it's well known that if you can cure sickle cell, you can probably cure anything because of the complexity. And so we have to remember that. We have to know that.
Yes,
we hold the key to a lot of medical science, and we have to be informed in how we navigate these spaces.
Yeah, and we should have way more power than we do. We don't have enough power. And honestly, participants in studies don't have as much power as I believe that they should have in the first place. I believe you should always own your genetic information, always. And always, don't have me sign off on something where you can do whatever you want with. I don't think that that's ethical either for scientists and doctors to ask these questions. But anyway, I'm musing now. I've already said what I had to say. I'll sit back and I'll bring my voice back down and someone else can speak. I'm sorry.
I agree with that, Terry. I do not think we should be signing over our genetic.
That's right.
And I think sorry, go ahead. Here.
Nope, I'm done.
I think to put a bond on it, I'm really grateful for Ray's kind of appeal and her exhortation that, it's not your fault as a parent, because, I know, Tahir and I, you and I kind of parted ways, but I do want to remind people, I'm also a parent, so I definitely understand that impulse, right? And so what Terry referenced as far as, wondering whether or not your child will hate you, or, and in a sense, the blame that we impart upon ourselves, whether it's deserved or not, as a parent, it's just natural. It's a part of your psychology as a parent. But I think because this is a philosophical views of sickle cell, I will drop my own little philosophy degree in a nutshell. You know, it's at the heart of the Buddhist philosophy that life is suffering. It's at the heart of existentialism. Life is suffering. And so whether that suffering takes the form of sickle cell or whether it takes the form of something else, there's always something as a parent you will find to beat yourself up about the pain that your child goes through. And many of us, we have siblings who don't have sickle cell, and they're in some kind of suffering that has nothing to do with sickle cell. You know what I mean? It could be mental, it could be whatever relation. It's just a part of what it means to be alive on this planet. And so the idea, sorry, that that should be a reason why we should go out of our way to make sure that sickle cell isn't around or that the allele goes away, to me just is problematic. But I understand at the heartstrings why people would choose otherwise. And that's, you know, as Ray concluded, it's a personal choice, and you really just be as informed as you possibly can and do that wisely and commit to it.
Sounds good.
A nice bow on that.
No, you said you wanted me to end on something pretty, so let's go.
Okay, so I have the very last question of our session, and hopefully there's many, many more. Like, I'm getting my life right now from this discussion, so thank you all so much. What is the best part about living with sickle cell disease? Or Ray, in your situation, what's the best part of, you know, being a parent of a child with sickle cell disease?
I thought I knew what resiliency was. First, I was a preacher's kid, so a PK, and I had to be quite resilient as a PK. But my son taught me what resiliency in action looks like. And I had not, I just love what you said, Phil, because the reality is that, you know, we live in what some might say a fallen world, and we cannot avoid pain and suffering in this world. And so he has really been, in fact, I've said it before in other talks that I've had, my son actually saved my life. I am a better version of myself because I am a caregiver of a child, now a man, with sickle cell disease. And that's what he gave me. And people can take that for what it is, but that's what he gave me. Who would like to answer that question next?
Just let you know, I'm still here. It's just getting dark. So I'm trying to figure out lighting over here. Yeah, but anybody's welcome to go next.
I would say that it is the strength that I have, that I have with sickle cell. It took many years for me to actually realize what strength really was. You know, the vision that we have of strength is, some, huge guy with all these bulging muscles, so a football player, and I am so, I'm like 5'9", 5'10", and I struggle to stay between 150 and 170, and I can look at some huge football player and be like, you're scared of a needle. How are you, but you think you're strong. You think that you know what strength and power is, and it was referred to as a superpower. And that's honestly what I believe when we were talking earlier, when I was speaking earlier about, the endurance of pain, and when Tahir spoke about how, how easy pregnancy was after, living with sickle cell all these years, which I have also heard many times that women say that, it's a cakewalk compared to sickle cell. I'm like, I can take more pain than any person on this planet. Bring them up here, and let's go. And so I think that knowing that, it has given me an incredible amount of confidence and an incredible amount of being comfortable in my own skin. It's like it's freeing, knowing something like that. And I didn't know that other people felt like that too. So it was very interesting I believe, well, Cassandra asked me a question, a year or so ago about something about, that power in having sickle cell. And so I think that that's what it is. It makes me very, very, very confident and very, know that I know what strength to pain is compared to a lot of other people. I don't know. That's me. So the next person can answer the question.
Um, Mine is similar to both you and Ray's. It's um, I feel like when it comes to having sickle cell disease, I've spent a lot of my life because of my dad being kind of forced to, his thing was pick up a book and go read, turn off the TV, pick up a book and go read. So I've like kind of shaped my life around like education and always wanting to know more, always wanting to study more. So it's, and I don't want to downplay our peers and our different colleagues and just where we are as a Black people right now with being woke or knowing about our history. But that was a place that I was at even as a child because of having sickle cell disease, right? My dad made it a point to teach me about my history. My dad made it a point to, and so that I wouldn't feel like sickle cell disease was a death sentence. It was more of, yeah, you have this, but look who else have it, right? Or look who else, look where it came from, right? This dentist from Grenada, right? He became a dentist and he had this disease, right? You can become a doctor. You can do this. So uh, living with sickle cell, to me, the best part was making a career out of it, right? I make money living with sickle cell disease because of sickle cell disease. I've gotten to travel the world because of sickle cell disease. I've gotten to teach and live abroad straight up because of sickle cell disease, nothing else, right? And if you took that away from me, sometimes I joke to my husband, but I often feel like I'm in like the group of X-Men. Like this is my superpower. And if you give me a cure, I don't know who I'm gonna be anymore. Right. And I may just have to figure that out. But right now I could do anything. I could do a lot of things that the average person cannot do. I can withstand a lot of things that the average person cannot do. And I take pride in that. And I thank God that I've been here this long, living with sickle cell disease, that I'm able to tell it and I'm able to show it to my daughter. I'm able to stand in arenas and she's 3 and she can see her mom doing all these crazy, extraordinary things, living with this illness, right? So I'm her example, and I don't feel like anyone else needs to be her example because I'm the best at it. So that's what the best part of living with sickle cell disease is to me, and that's a great question. Thank you for asking us.
Yeah. And I think just so many great points have already been stated, but I think with the right mindset, it is a superpower. That's the best part of having it, right? It's from my sickle cell that I get my resilience. It's from my sickle cell that I get my humility. It's from my sickle cell that, again, alluding to Proverbs 3, verses 5-8, that I am constantly reminded to trust God, right? Because with sickle cell, well, when you catch crisis and it's disruptive to your life, that's an opportunity for me to pause and reflect. Okay, do you want something different? Does he want something different from me? And I'm excited to be on the panel with folks like like Terry here who are literally embracing their sickle cell so hard that the opportunities that they have come from it, to pursue PhD in genetics, to just, understanding that you have that, and what Tahira is able to do is just is awesome, right? You get to be out there. And so, yeah, sometimes it does mean we have to move a little different. But isn't that true of superheroes? Like superheroes, they got to move different. They can't move like everybody else. They can't keep up with the Joneses the way sometimes we with sickle cell want to do. And I think sometimes we get so fixated on all the things that we can't do that's like everybody else, and that can get us down. But we learn to catch the other side of it. It can be very empowering. I'll leave it there.
Beautiful.
What's your best part, Cass?
Exactly. Yes.
See, I wasn't prepared to answer this question, but it'd probably be in the same sentiment as, you know, what you all, and I actually recorded a podcast episode with kind of like, you know, where our theme for this month is Sickle Cell Taught Me. And I really think that the pain and the suffering creates character. And I just to echo what every one of you have said, I wouldn't be who I am without, you know, without going through that pain. And I think I said that there's just this quiet pride that I have when I walk into any room and I know I'm the strongest person in that room. Of course, not with y'all, but you know, just any other circumstance. There's that pride where I know I've been through some stuff, and I just know that I'm the strongest person there. Like there's no questions asked. So it's just Sickle Cell has taught me how to live life in the same sentiment as, you know, to know true happiness, you need to know sadness. Um, that's what Sickle Cell is like. You know, we've all experienced near-death situations, so we really have that, like, a true appreciation for life. And so I feel like I've lived, you know, the whole spectrum of life because of Sickle Cell. And there's a lot of people on earth alive just kind of walking around, not really with any purpose or anything, but I have purpose, and I know that spectrum of life. And so I can really say I've lived life. So that's my 2 cents in all of this. But thank
Love
you
it.
all so very much for all the insight, all the wisdom. This, like, right here is like just the perfect group, and what an honor it is and what a privilege it is to just sit here and listen to you all speak, and you know, speak these, you know, these gems really. And I know a lot of people will gain a lot from this conversation. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Cass. It's an honor to sit amongst the all of the superstars and all of the
I really
superheroes.
feel like you all are superstars here, and I'm just here just like a fly on the wall. It's amazing, and hopefully we can continue to have these conversations. I hope this isn't the last one. Like, I hope we
Yeah, we have to do a part 2, part 3.
Yeah. Yes.
I need Terry and Phil to walk me through this eugenics. Because it's going to stay on my mind. You're going to see me up all night now, like, what?
And I've had conversations with each one of you all, and so I know, just like, you know, you guys have like just this deepness, and I was just like, oh, I need to get this together. So thank you so much
Thank you.
for that.
You know, I thought for a second really quickly that, you know, back to the why me question, you know, and then it just popped in my mind exactly what I actually do is that I don't actually say why me, but like when I'm going through it, you know, I ask God in the universe, I say, give me the strength to endure this, you know, get me through it. Because I'm the one that has to deal with it. You know what I'm saying? And he does that. She does that very well. And I'm thankful for it. So, and it's a pleasure to meet all of you. I'm thrilled to be a part of this this panel, and I hope to talk to you all again soon.
Ditto.
Yeah.
Same.
Thank you all so much. So what's gonna happen is this is gonna live on the website. Let me stop recording, and then